The Agency is the latest espionage spy thriller on Paramount Plus, a show that's methodically slow-paced but also pretty tense, with a solid storyline and some excellent acting throughout. There are a couple of plot holes, and if you've seen the French show this one is based on, the American remake is not going to hold a candle to that. But these gripes aside, The Agency is certainly worth a watch. The main hook of the show centers on intelligence officers behind enemy lines, putting on a facade and building a life, all under the guise of extracting information from their targets. Then, like a ghost, they up and leave, back to the CIA to be debriefed before being thrown back in the field again for their next operation. The senior officer we follow through the show is called Martian, whose real name is Paul Lewis. He's away on a top-secret mission in Ethiopia, where he spent the last 6 years extracting information for the guys back home. However, what he didn't bank on was falling in love with a woman called Samia Zahir. When Martian returns to the UK, he breaks protocol and decides to contact Sammy again. The thing is, he's not sure if she's actually part of the same game he is, and could well be an undercover agent. What ensues from here is a tense game of cat and mouse, as Martian continues to let his feelings betray his training. Unfortunately, when Martian and Samia cross paths, they do so with newfound suspicion from a guy called Osman. He knows there's something not quite right with this man and sets out to discover exactly what Martian may be hiding, to devastating effect. Conversely, Martian's handler at the CIA, Naomi, also suspects there's something going on, but she's busy handling a rookie agent, which we'll circle back to shortly. Interwoven around Martian's storyline is a more widespread threat involving an agent named Coyote. The first time we see this guy, he's joyriding through Minsk after going rogue, and ends up captured by the authorities. Given Coyote was not much of a drinker, and seems to have gone completely off-grid. It's certainly no coincidence that the Russians are up to no good and could well be involved, prompting a tense race against time to ensue, as the CIA scramble to get their man back, all whilst hoping for the best that he doesn't crack and reveal years of secrets to a foreign agency. That is, if he's not already working with them. These two plots do a pretty good job of intersecting and building tension, especially toward the end of the show as the respective plot lines start to build toward the finish line. However, there are a couple of contrivances and plot holes here that will leave you scratching your head. I've said this before, but if a show has a deliberately slow pace, it needs to be well written and tightly wound, because otherwise, audiences will start to question the set pieces in more detail. At one point, Osman has his goons follow Martian as he goes about his day. However, they only follow him when he's posing as Paul, not when he's Martian. This is a particular problem because in all that time they don't want to see this guy go into the CIA building. To be fair, there's one instance where Paul does lose them, but it all feels a bit too convenient. Similarly, Paul Lewis' cover is that he's an aspiring author who's looking to write a book. At one point he heads into a publisher's office, knowing he's being followed, but the agents never follow up to see if any of the publishers have heard of him. These sort of moments hold this back from being a massive hit, but your mileage with these sort of issues will certainly vary. There's also an instance late on where the CIA decide to bug a pair of boots for a high-profile target, but they do so by switching well-worn military boots with brand new ones. And yes, this goes about as well as you may expect. These sort of moments are dotted throughout the show, and they certainly make you second-guess the credentials of these seasoned individuals. There is a third storyline here too, but honestly, there's not much to write home, and it's the worst part of the whole show. Here, we follow Danny, a brand new agent who's designed solely to give us exposition about the recruiting process and the slow degradation of humanity as you become an agent. Her handler is Naomi, who basically handholds her through the process for the first half of the show, but her story goes nowhere. In fact, late on there's an interrogation scene that Danny manages to get through solely because Naomi gives her a prompt an episode prior, which feels a bit too convenient. Danny's whole mission across the 10 episodes is to become the assistant to a professor on a trip out to Iraq, and that's it. Given the show has already been renewed for season 2, I'd imagine this will play a larger part of the sophomore season, but in its current state, every time Danny is on screen it feels like wasted time. We don't really glean anything from this storyline either, although to be fair, a couple of questionable moral decisions do hark back into the shades of gray the agency plays with as its core themes. But then we already see that with characters like Martian and Samia, so it feels redundant. There's certainly some big stars in this that do a solid job with the material given. Michael Fassbender puts in an excellent performance as Martian, with some close-up shots showing the conflict ion he's plagued with in all its ugly glory. Alongside him, we also have Richard Gere, Jodie Turner-Smith, Jeffrey Wright, and Kirti Jayawan, who step effortlessly into their roles. The big elephant in the room, though, is the French version this is based on. It's head and shoulders above this, goes for 5 seasons, and has an excellent pacing throughout. As a remake, this isn't bad, but fans of the original are probably going to have a hard time getting into this one without drawing big comparisons. The pacing here is definitely slower and there's definitely more action set pieces, but if you can take to the first 2 to 3 episodes, you will probably have a good time with this one. And yes, this holds up much better as a binge watch than it does a weekly affair. Aesthetically, The Agency looks great too. There's some solid camera work here and the editing is smartly done to ratchet up the tension. There are a lot of interior scenes as one may expect from a show like this, but the sets are dressed well and there's a conscious effort done to busy every scene. At times it is a bit overkill though, like the show creators didn't have enough faith in the massive exposition from time to time that they needed to try and keep audiences invested, but it's a minor point, all things considered. However, it's not all busy hallways and walk-and-talk scenes, as there are some action sequences in here too, which are similarly well shot. Toward the end there's an operation that goes down in Eastern Europe which flits back and forth between the field and the agency, while the middle of the show features some thrilling chase sequences, including on foot and on a motorcycle. The minimalist soundtrack feels like the metaphorical cherry atop this cake, and the tracks chosen for the eerie, intense sequences work very well to accentuate the emotions on screen. There are also a couple of montage sequences featuring bigger-named artists, and for the most part, the music does a great job in accentuating the mood of this one. There have been a lot of spy thrillers on TV recently, and while The Agency isn't as bombastic as something like Day of the Jackal, it's arguably better in its overall execution. The deliberately slow pace won't be for everyone, and yes, there are some plot holes here too. For the most part though, this is a tense espionage thriller with enough in the tank across its 10 episodes to make for an easy recommendation.